The Disney company is working at a fevered pace to convert a Moana TV series into Moana 2 in time for November. We're now finding out because of a report from Film Threat that Disney almost put a different film in theaters, but because of the reception of Wish, they canceled that film altogether right before they were about to go full steam on that movie. Let's talk about that on That Park Place. Hello, I'm Jonas J. Campbell, an investigative reporter for That Park Place, and here with me is theme park expert and animation connoisseur, Mr. VashSky. Vash, you like the cartoons?
I do like the cartoons. I find myself watching a little bit more anime than I do Western animation. But you know what, Jonas? I have a ticket for Wild Robot, and man, oh man, I am hearing some great things about that film.
You know what? This is probably going to come out after our review of Wild Robot, so I'll have to let you know if you liked it. That being said, let's go to this story out of Film Threat, the next D-File here. The D-Files, the untitled 2024 Disney animated feature. This by Alan Ng over there. Alan is a good friend of the channel, and he's doing excellent work covering Disney. But let's read. With the recent news of Jennifer Lee stepping down as Chief Creative Officer of Walt Disney Animation, it's hard not to reflect on her devastating impact on the OG animation studio that started with a mouse. You can read the original D-Files here. We talked about this a little bit on That Park Place Live as well. But for those of you not aware, Jennifer Lee stepped down as head of Disney Animation and is being replaced by Jared Bush, who was involved in Moana and some other productions. Zootopia comes to mind. She will, instead of leaving the company entirely, she's going to be focused as the director of Frozen 3 and also the writer of Frozen 4. She was the director and writer of the original Frozen, I think also Frozen 2. So, you know, there's a lot of tales about Anna and Elsa and whether or not they care for each other going forward. So that's good, I guess. Walt Disney Animation, however, under her goals there were to include diverse voices to lead the next generation of feature animation. In 2019, Lee announced the names of 4 storytellers to direct 4 new films. That would be one of her first acts after John Lasseter left the company. Walt Disney Animation names these directors right here. Look at those. Look at those directors. They're almost all smiling. From within WDA, Lee chose Josie Trinidad, story for Zootopia and Ralph Breaks the Internet, and Mark Smith, the director of story for Frozen 2. Lee pulled from outside 2 other people. The first is Carlos Lopez Estrada, who directed Raya and The Last Dragon, at least at first. Go check out the D-Files on that. And an Iranian American filmmaker, Suzy Younesi, who did Unlovable and Dear Lemon Lima. Many of the veteran animators saw these hirings, particularly Estrada and Younesi, as WDA embracing diversity, equity, and inclusion, which a lot of the on-files metrics for diversity, equity, and inclusion coming under some fire on whether or not they're actually legal because, you know, who knew you're not allowed to discriminate in hiring practices based off of people's immutable characteristics. Vash, did you know that?
I honestly had no idea, Jonas. No idea. That is absurd. No, yes, absolutely. That's been the case, since like the 1960s, ever since the Civil Rights Act was actually passed. So no surprise that, you can't discriminate in the workplace based on anything other than merit. And honestly, that's kind of how it should be. Because, as we have seen from the fall of Disney Animation recently, it is critical that the ranks of talent be judged on said talent. You know, this can't be understated, folks. Jennifer Lee was the Kathleen Kennedy of Disney Animation. And Disney Animation, I would say, is probably one of the most important divisions within the entire Disney organization. If you track the history of Disney, especially for like the last 40 years or so, you can actually see the rise and fall of the entire Disney company predicated almost exclusively on Disney Animation itself. When Disney Animation rises, the whole company rises, and that flywheel can spin out all kinds of content to the various divisions, consumer products, parks and experiences, linear television, all of that, because of franchises that come out of or that are born out of this division. So this was crucial for Disney to get right. Unfortunately, that hasn't been the case for years.
Absolutely correct and very well said. Disney has had a long line of veteran animators investing time and energy in the hope that they would one day helm a Disney classic. Now, these scarce opportunities were given to people who were labeled diverse and never worked in animation. As uncovered in past D-Files, the old white guys were not given prominent scenes to animate in favor of inexperienced women of color. This snub began the slow and total exodus of veteran talent from Walt Disney Animation to competitor studios, including Skydance. Skydance is, of course, where John Lasseter is currently the head of animation. It remains to be seen with Skydance buying Paramount what that will mean for Paramount and their studios, which, of course, include Nickelodeon. Skydance Animation doing work on its own there. We have yet to see Spellbound, which is not directed by John Lasseter, but that's the first production in which he will be the head of the studio, and with no apologies, he came in as luck was coming through the pipeline. I don't know that he could have refit that entire process here. Of course, we did reference the Wild Robot. Chris Sanders is a person that left Disney at some point. He's not a victim of this same exact process here because he was actually fired under John Lasseter's regime. But Josh Cooley, who is the director of Transformers One, that is a film that is getting rave reviews right now. And he stated, and I don't think he was complaining, I don't think he was understanding how this would be perceived when he said it. But after he got done with Toy Story 4, which the last time I checked, that film was a big deal for Disney Animation, and they like to brag about how much that movie made. Josh Cooley said that it was going to be 2029 before he got the chance to make another movie at Pixar. So if he wanted to have a career, he was going to have to leave Pixar and go work someplace else, which is essentially what he did. Now, I don't think Transformers 1 is going to make $1 billion at the box office, but it is going to make its budget back. And if Disney and Pixar decided to hire him back, it's going to have to be at a more expensive rate now. Anyways, getting back to this article specifically, jump to a year ago with Disney's Wish coming to theaters. This was the current slate of films for this year. We're going to emphasize down here this Wednesday, November 27th, otherwise known as Thanksgiving weekend, untitled Disney animation right here. By the way, there's already some moving around of things right here. Inside Out 2 wasn't originally slated for this slot. That was moved into that slot after Elio was moved later into the process, and it sounds like they're refitting the entirety of Elio at this point. There's been a recast of a I don't know if she's a supporting character or a primary character, but Elio's mom or aunt has either been switched or something like that. Young Woman in the Sea was a Disney Plus release under Jerry Bruckheimer that was supposed to not go to theaters at all. That ended up in theaters. Untitled Deadpool movie. That obviously turned out very well for them. I forget what this one is, but going to emphasize right here, this is supposed to be Thanksgiving weekend, and they didn't have anything to fill that slot. It ended up being Moana 2, which was a TV show. Again, a TV show intended for Disney Plus, and now the Vancouver studio that was working on a TV show, now the Disney Animation Burbank studio, and this, I want to emphasize this, when it was a TV show, it was not as big of a deal that Vancouver's animation studio was working on this because Burbank was still where all primary Disney animation would take place. They might have outsourced a shot or two, or maybe larger than that, but all of that would be centered around Burbank. So it came as a great shock to the Burbank offices when they found out that there were 200, maybe 400 people working on a new Disney feature using a primary Disney property for a primary Disney slot. That Thanksgiving slot is a big slot, and that they would not be working in California under Jennifer Lee for the entire time. Also, the director has never directed a Disney feature before, but that's overcomable. Obviously, someone has to have their first at some point.
This is such an amazing revelation in this article, because it wasn't just Disney Animation, this historic studio that's done all kinds of work for so many years on animated films like Disney Renaissance films for one, but there's a lot of interesting gems all over the place. This wasn't like a Mulan situation where they were going to have maybe a new IP developed on an outside studio, and that studio would eventually close. It looks like productions going forward might take place actually in Vancouver. So think about it. You have a top tier franchise that originates in the Burbank studio, taken away from you to Vancouver. And then on top of that, well, as Alan Ng's amazing reporting has revealed, apparently that usurped an actual film that was actively in production at the moment for that specific slot. Now, I remember going over that list that we just went over before, Jonas, and I was surprised that untitled Disney animated film, we hadn't heard necessarily anything about it, and obviously that slot was filled by Moana 2. But apparently it wasn't just filled, it replaced what was there.
Right. And there was part of me that wondered if the live action Lilo and Stitch movie was going to take that place. Chris Sanders, obviously fresh off of The Wild Robot now, he is voicing Stitch in that he was the director of the first Lilo and Stitch movie. And Disney, he walked out the door at Disney. I'm not going to say he was the one who initiated that. Looks like he was fired. Anyhow. Fired off of what eventually became Bolt. But let's read, this is the scoop from Alan Ng. My sources tell me that the untitled Disney animation was never supposed to be Moana 2, but a story spearheaded by diverse hire Suzy Unessi. Though Unessi had several successful live action films under her belt, she may have found herself in over her head in the world of animation. It appears that Unessi's film was not only paused, but flat out canceled. The film was about to enter the launch sequence when Wish came out, but was canceled at the last minute. This left Walt Disney Studios with only 2 films in theaters in 2024, Young Woman and the Sea, again, a Disney Plus release at the beginning of the year, and Mufasa at the end, Mufasa being the prequel to the live-action-ish remake of The Lion King. This begs the question, how did no one outside of Disney know about this project until now? Disney has an incredible PR team. That's how. After some internet investigation, here's what we know about Suzy Unessi's film. In her book, Disney Princesses Beyond the Tiara, Emily Zemler speaks with Unessi about her chance to create a new Disney princess. Her animated feature was based on a fairy tale her grandmother told her as a child, and a chance to bring Persian culture to the big screen. From Zemler's article in Hello Giggles, Jasmine gave me a moment of such pride in my heritage and my culture, Unessi says, and especially being from upstate New York in the suburbs of Buffalo where there was little diversity, it showed me there was a whole world out there that was filled with all these different shades of brown. That for me was a defining moment in terms of the princesses and their power. The Disney princesses were my superheroes. In a statement about her influences, Unessi says her grandmother's fairy tale has mythical lakes, talking cockroaches, and deserts that stretch beyond the imagination. Since helming her project, Unessi has been leading and participating in industry panels and presentations under the moniker of director at Walt Disney Animation Studios. She has been working on this project for 5 years. I wonder if any of that has changed now. So at this point, a lot has changed at Walt Disney Animation Studios, and I'm wondering if having a director who talks about her Iranian or Persian ancestry here, and considering the current global geopolitical climate, which I'm going to leave out of this video, but reference the fact that maybe Disney, when they were making the decisions about Wish, would have been aware of that. And also Bob Iger obviously came out condemning that part of the conflict there, not in the way that would be popular with Rachel Zegler. I wonder if Disney saw this and decided to delay it, or has this gone the way of Gigantic, where it just kind of disappears, even though sounds like it was pretty late in development. Vash, how many times has Disney scrapped an entire film that has been announced?
Very rarely, very rarely. Gigantic is definitely one of them. That was probably the most notable of the last, I want to say, decade or so. But the article actually mentions, Alan Ng actually mentions that Emperor's New Groove was supposed to be a completely different movie up until the point that film was made. Interestingly enough, there's a good documentary out there provided by Sting's wife, of all people, because Sting was to provide the music for the prior version of that film. But these things are pretty rare, especially it would have been 5 years working on it at that time, which is about the average development cycle or process for any of these animated films. And to scrap all that, seemingly, for Moana 2 is very interesting. This was definitely a move, I think, by Bob Iger saying, hey, look, listen, we need a hit. These original films coming out of the studio aren't doing it for us. And, well, we are actively fending off Nelson Peltz, because you have to understand, when Moana 2 was actually announced, that was right before a big annual shareholders meeting in which that proxy vote would actually take place. This was an earnings call right before. So this was definitely a move to put off Nelson Peltz and inspire more confidence in their studio and entertainment divisions.
I totally agree with you, and this does seem to be coming from a place of defense here. Obviously, with Inside Out 2, and I've had the chance to watch that again recently, and I see a lot of ideas that seem to be from the cutting room floor of the first Inside Out. I think the first Inside Out is a masterpiece, a movie that is saying something about life, and Inside Out 2. The consequences of that film are the identity crisis that everyone goes through as they go into those teenage years, and also whether or not Riley gets into hockey a year earlier than she probably should. That's I don't know. The movie just misses on all marks for me. Too much Riley, not enough Joy, and also none of the characters seem to correlate to what they're supposed to be doing. It's like, we hope you watch the first one, because this really is not that good if you don't have the context of how great that first one is. But looking at this and thinking, like, what is going on there at Disney Studios, and I hope that Moana 2 is more of that Disney magic that we would expect, and not an Inside Out 2. It would be really good if it got the numbers of an Inside Out 2, for the sake of all the people who work at Disney. But I'm hoping for something of higher quality. I think Barlow and Bear, that might be the name of the songwriting duo that is working on some of Moana 2. They're pretty talented. I reviewed some of their work over the weekend, personally, not for the channel. And they have, I think, the ability to write some good, lyrically dense, not too dense, not Lin-Manuel Miranda lyrically dense, but like a musical theater lyrically dense songs for Moana 2. So I'm hopeful there. I don't know. I want to throw this to our commenters, though. What do you think about this Disney film that might have been about an Iranian princess here? And would you like to see that in the future? I'm always curious to see any project that is good. I don't know that Disney Animation in its current form, while it still sounds like it's in a new transition period, so we'll wait to see. I don't know if they are there right now where they can produce something on the level of a Tangled or a Beauty and the Beast or a Princess and the Frog. I don't know. Let us know your thoughts in the comment section down below. Like this video if you like this video, and if you don't mind, consider subscribing to That Park Place for all the news that should be fun.
Thanks for watching That Park Place News. For more information, consider checking out www.thatparkplace.com. And don't forget to subscribe, share, like, and send this out on your favorite social media accounts.